In this video, we're gonna take a quick tour of Lily's studio, which is actually in the middle of our living room. And I'm gonna show you how we have the entire video rig set up on one pole and the rack of gear that runs her live streams behind me. First, let me give you a quick description of what Lily does on her live streams and the kind of camera angles and other things that she uses. Her live stream is about personal finance or planners or a combination of both. She's basically doing talking head live streams, but she also has a top-down camera. So first we have her main angle here. This is a LUMIX GX85, and we've just got the 14-42 lens on it. We've got her top-down camera here, which is actually able to film whatever's on the desk here, including a planner or a donut. The overhead camera is the Sony a6400, and it actually has a 28 to 70 millimeter zoom lens on it, which again is nice because we can adjust exactly the field of view that we want on it in case we want to get a more close-up shot or go a little bit wider on whatever is on the table there. Both cameras are hardwired into power using their little DC battery adapter. So that goes into the battery slot and then gives us a USB power outlet on the bottom. The microphone is the AT875R from Audio-Technica. The microphone cover is covered in cat hair because they think this is the best toy. They come up here and actually steal the cover off and then go run around with it, which is cute, but also terrifying. But it's a nice microphone. It gives a good sound. And I actually ended up getting 2 more of these for my studio downstairs. I like the way that Lily's stream sounded so much. And those are the only 2 camera angles that she really has, but she does have the ability to bring in a couple other things as well. So we have an Apple TV plugged in back here so that she can do things like screen share from a computer using AirPlay, or share photos off of an iPhone wirelessly using AirPlay as well. Sometimes I also use a clean feed camera app and bring in a remote camera that way, filming the cats running around with whatever shenanigans they're up to. Like right now, this one's just hiding under a bag. But of course, the other important part of a live stream is the chat. So of course, she wants people to show chat messages on the stream. So in order to do that, I've actually got a separate device plugged into the desk here, which is this Ultra Studio Monitor 3G. This is like a small version of the larger one that has the dual output. This only has a single out, HDMI out, running back into the ATEM back there. She can plug this into her computer and then use this to display chat messages cleanly without having to do screen sharing. I'll talk more about how that works in a little bit. There is one more camera angle here, which you can see on the multi-view up there, which is the donut shop. The donut shop is a little cardboard cat toy that we use to both store the cat toys, but also it looks like a donut shop and it's very cute. And since her live stream is about talking dough and eating donuts, it makes a lot of sense. But I've actually got a little iPad up on here, which is rigged into the chat system so that, and if anybody sends a super chat during the stream, that is able to display their messages on the screen there as well. That camera is sitting on the floor. It's actually an OBSBot PTZ camera. We don't often use the PTZ function of it, sometimes manually adjust it, but it is actually rigged up into the Stream Deck as well so that you can remote control it. So those are the main camera angles. We'll talk about lighting and sound in a minute, but I also wanted to talk about the main gear that runs the stream, which is the ATEM Mini Extreme. I chose the ATEM Mini Extreme for this because primarily of the Super Source feature, as well as I guess the ability to have the 8 camera angles. Now again, we don't have 8 cameras here, but once you start adding these other inputs like the chat overlay or an Apple TV, it actually does add up pretty fast. One of the other inputs I didn't mention yet is the Hyperdeck, which is playing back video clips. So that includes the countdown timer at the beginning of her stream, as well as the little animations that she uses in the middle to introduce the donut or introduce the floof of the week. Those are just little video clips that she can queue up using the Stream Deck here, and they will play out on the stream. This is the Stream Deck that she uses for the show. This is the main show page. I'm not going to go through all the configuration on here, but I do want to just kind of show at a high level the buttons we have on here. So her main buttons are making sure the audio is turned on, switching between the camera or the Apple TV full screen or camera with the Apple TV, which is that side-by-side layout. We've also got the Apple TV with the circle picture-in-picture in the corner, and the other camera, the donut shop, or a camera with the donut shop. So that was that top row of buttons for the camera angles. There's also this row, which is the main camera, the overhead with a side-by-side, the overhead with a picture-in-picture. And there's a couple other pages in here that are useful as well. This is the pre-show page where she can start the countdown timer, which really just fast forwards that video clip to a certain part in the clip. This is the actual button that starts the ATEM streaming to YouTube. And that's the start show button, which will do things like turn on the microphone and switch to the right camera angle. There's a couple of graphics loaded into the ATEM as well, which is for rating donuts. So if she's got a 4 out of 5 donut, press that, and then on the screen, you'll see a little donut bar at the bottom. The Stream Deck is actually also tied into the home automation system, which means we can actually do things like turn on and off the main key light, which is actually going to turn off a power outlet that's in the rack here. So if I tap that, the main light turns off, and now I can turn, this is how she can just start and stop the show for setup. So the ATEM Mini Extreme is the main switcher behind the whole operation. All the inputs go into that. That's sitting actually in the back little tiny rack here. I'll show you a close-up of this video card in a second. I'm actually really happy with it. But the ATEM Mini Extreme was key to this because of the SuperSource layouts. So I can go here and show you, for example, the camera in the donut shop. So with the SuperSource feature, we can do things like create more interesting layouts of the multiple cameras. So in addition to this, main angle, if I wanted to share a video clip from the phone, for example, I can go and show Apple TV with the camera, and now this is my phone playing back a video wirelessly to the Apple TV, and the main camera is next to it, and that's using the SuperSource feature in the ATEM. Of course, there's also the overhead camera with the picture as well. This is not a great overhead shot, but now I can show you the Ultra Studio Monitor 3G, and my main camera angle is next to it. We've also got the overhead with a circle picture-in-picture. So we've got these different layouts that are all created in the ATEM and saved as presets using the Stream Deck. I do actually have a separate video that talks all about using the Stream Deck to control an ATEM, setting up a companion on a Raspberry Pi. I'll leave a link to that below instead of going into it in this video. Okay, so before we get into showing what's in the rack back there, I want to first do an overview of everything that's on this pole sitting in front of me. This is most of the rigging is actually on a single pole here in the living room. So starting at the top, we have the light, the main light for the shot. This is the Godox SL150 Mark II. It's actually a completely silent light, which is why I like it. It's not actually at full power right now. It is at about 50%, and the fans don't kick on at 50%, which is nice. And even when they do kick on, you can barely hear them. So the pole is actually suspended between the floor and the ceiling, and it is it's a Varipole, which is sort of just tension fit in place. The light is mounted to the pole using a clamp that gives it a little peg that the light can actually screw onto. The other thing I like about this light is that it has just a regular power cord. There isn't a big bulky power supply for it. So it's got a regular computer style power cord that goes all the way down into the power outlet, and there's no big chunky power supply for it needed. Okay, working our way down the pole, the next thing is this light. This is a little thin panel light, which is used to light the workspace, the desk here. So this is clamped to the pole with a different kind of clamp. It's just a slimmer version that we can use to make the light mounted even closer to the pole. So coming down, we have this vice grip, which is gripping the pole. Attached to the vice grip on the little pin is this ratchet clamp, which then lets me put this 15mm pole coming out of it, which has this little rig on the end for the overhead camera. This lets me get the overhead camera pretty nice and tight into this whole rig, but also then at the right angle to shoot straight down, even though this whole pole is coming up at a sharp angle. Also attached to this 15mm pole is another little magic arm, which is for the microphone. And that's to get the microphone at a good angle for this, so that we can also make sure it's always pointing straight at Lily's face. Moving down the pole further, we have another Superclamp with a little pole sticking out, and this is for the main camera. So this one has this is just a cheap ball head attached to that, and the main camera sits there, and that way we can do slight adjustments of the angle and the tilt. And if we go down further, there's yet another Superclamp, which is for the monitor. Same situation of a little pole sticking out with a ball head for the monitor, so that there's a monitor very close to the camera. On the back side, I've actually done a pretty good job with cable management, which is somewhat unusual for me, but this is probably because we don't actually change this around very often, and also it's literally in the living room, so I don't want it to be a giant mess. So the one cord that goes up here is the power cord for the lamp, and then we've got power for this light running here, and then the power for the camera and HDMI for the camera come down, and they go into this bundle, and eventually we end up with the other HDMI for this camera, power for this camera, HDMI for the monitor, power for that monitor, all neatly down into this little bundle down here. This panel light does have a big chunky power supply, but it's okay. It's hanging off of one of the super clamps here, and I think it's still pretty neat. Okay, let's move around to the rack. I am very pleased with how this rack turned out. You can see it's pretty small. It's just taller than the height of the desk, and it's weirdly the perfect size for the ATEM Mini Extreme that's sitting in there. We've got the ATEM Mini Extreme, and this is actually really important. It's sitting on this stand because that lets me get access to all the cables. This is the PK1 stand, and this is the Coverlee for it, which is made by NX3D. And this is a little protective cover, which is actually really useful because otherwise the cats might get up here and bump some of the buttons. Plus it's cute that it's branded. So this is all the cables come out the back here, and this way they are not stuck down in the little lip down there. And the other thing that's behind the ATEM is a Raspberry Pi, which is for companion. So the ATEM and the Raspberry Pi are on the top, and moving down to the second shelf, this is where most of the other gear is. Now this is a bit of a mess. Let me get some light in here so you can see a little better. It's a bit of a mess down here, but I think all things considered, it's not too bad. So there's a couple of different pieces of gear in here. We've actually got 2 different network switches because one of them wasn't enough for all the gear in here. So this is an 8-port, that's a 5-port. There is a Hyperdeck, which is used for all the video clip playback. Down there is the Apple TV, kind of invisible down there. We're actually not using this one anymore. That's a splitter for the Chromecast, which we're also not using anymore. We used to run the chat off the Chromecast, but have actually switched over to the method with the Ultra Studio, so I can actually get rid of some of that. The big chunk back there is the audio interface, so that's plugging in the microphone and giving us a output running into the ATEM. I've been trying this Bird Dog Play for a wireless camera support, but it's actually not been super successful. It is just always a little bit too sluggish pulling a video feed off of my iPhone, so haven't really been using that much. So really the main things in here are the audio mixer, the Apple TV, the Hyperdeck, and then the networking gear. Down at the very bottom is the power supply. So this is a battery backup, just in case the power goes out midstream, and then this gives us power to all the gear. And this is actually a pretty decent setup. I feel like it's reasonably tidy. All the cables are very, cleanly run along the sides here, so it's not a giant mess. And this does actually roll around. We don't typically roll around very often, but it can move around a little bit. One of the other things I want to talk about is the background. Now, of course, this is not the most ideal background for her show. Ideally, it would look a little bit more on brand, a little bit cuter. But again, this is just our living room, so it's kind of the best we can do. These are extremely functional shelves hiding a lot of our stuff right now, but one of the things she's done is push the drawer in a little bit and then put a LED light shining up, and that just makes a couple of the boxes look a little bit more fun, which is better than it just being entirely dark. Speaking of making it dark, you might notice that there are a couple windows back there that are not showing any light through them. And that's actually really important for this. The light changes dramatically in here throughout the day, and of course we want to have control over the lighting in the room. And that brings me to these blackout shades. So without the blackout curtains down, you can see there's some light in the background there, and we have no control over that, and it will change color temperatures, and if there's clouds going by, it might get brighter and dimmer. So ideally we would just be able to black it out. And this brings me to one of the coolest things I think about this entire space, which is the Smartwings automatic shades. Now, Smartwings did actually send this out to me to share on this channel, and I'm very excited about it, so I do want to tell you about them now. The Smartwings shades are automatic roller shades. They have a couple different styles. I got the roller shades version of them, and they can be controlled wirelessly. There's a couple different wireless control options. There is a remote, but you can also get a motor that can support either HomeKit or even Home Assistant through an open protocol, or if you want to tie it into Alexa or Google Home, that's all possible. So because I actually do run Home Assistant here, which is an open source home automation platform, that's one of the ways that a lot of the stuff in here is controlled, including the main key light for the studio. So for example, I can just go ahead and turn off the key light and you'll see now it's really dark. That's a button on the Stream Deck. So I can press the button on the Stream Deck and then it'll turn on. But I also have the ability to tie in the Stream Deck through Home Assistant to control the shades. Rather than giving her a special button to press to drop the shades, I figured why not make the shades drop automatically as soon as she starts streaming to YouTube. So as soon as she pushes the on-air button, which is going to start pushing data to YouTube, all the shades in the apartment are going to lower. And that way, don't have to think about anything extra. It's just all automatic. As soon as she's going to start going live, start the countdown timer, this is all going to just immediately get nice and dark in here and prepare for the stream. And now you would never know that it's daylight outside. It's extremely dark in here except for the key light and the lights that I can control. And as soon as she's done with the stream, she just pushes off air and all the shades start coming back up again. So it's all automatic. You don't really have to think about how to control the shades. There's no separate button for it. Of course, if you do want manual control over it, you can also use the remote or use buttons that you've created in Home Assistant, or just yell at the robot in the kitchen. The process of actually installing the shades was surprisingly simple. It all came very well packaged and with very clear instructions. So the shades, you basically hang up brackets first on the inside of your window. I kind of just screwed these brackets in, and then the shades just kind of clip in. You just grab them, clip them into the bracket, and that's it. Now I also got the upgrade, which includes these tracks along the side, which help with the ability to block more light. If you don't have the tracks, then a little bit of light will creep through the sides of the shades. These tracks will actually block that completely. And it also helps the shades drop straight down always and not accidentally get knocked around by stuff that might be in the window. So the tracks help the shades get guided straight down, and then they block that little edge of light around the windows. I do recommend getting the tracks if you are considering doing this, because it does make a huge difference. The shades can be powered either from a battery, or if you want to plug them into wall power, you can do that as well. I prefer plugging things in hardwired when possible, just because it means less stuff to worry about. But the battery option also does include the option of adding a solar panel, so that theoretically, as long as you have enough sunlight, it just always is recharged. But I decided to go with the hardwired option, so I did some cable management and ran this USB cord. And it has a USB on the end, so you just run this cord kind of along between the track and the window, that way you don't see it. And then you can plug that into a USB power source. Or if you had a USB battery, you could plug it in as well. I got kind of lucky and happened to have power outlets close enough to all the windows in here that I was able to find an outlet nearby, and I don't really see the wires at all. So if you're interested in picking up these shades, just go to the website and you can choose the different sizes of your windows. They all get custom made to exactly the right size. You can choose the options in terms of what coverings you want, what color of shade, whether you want the tracks, what kind of motor you want. It's all available on the website to choose from, and it gives you the price right there live updating, so you can see exactly what it's going to be. Controlling the shades, again, I mentioned there's this remote which this is the simple remote which can control up to 5 different shades. You can either you can cycle between controlling individual shades or all at once, and then you press the down and they will all drop at once. But because I got the upgraded motor with the ability to have wireless control, I can also go and pair that with the Apple HomeKit and connect it to Home Assistant. That is a little bit more advanced I want to get into in this studio tour video, so I'll save that tutorial for a separate video. So thanks again to Smartwings for sending these out. It's been a huge upgrade in here. I really think it makes a huge difference. It's also nice to be able to actually black out the house just to go to sleep when the sun doesn't even set until 9:30 in the summer here. And lastly, I mentioned I was going to describe a little bit about how the chat works for Lily's stream. So again, this is using the Ultra Studio Monitor 3G, which is a little Thunderbolt to HDMI dongle. Now, the way this works is actually, this is connected into OBS. So you launch OBS and you can bring in your graphics into OBS however you want. In my case, I'm doing the chat through the web overlay. So it's actually a web page that gets loaded into OBS. And then you can go into the option of, after you install the software for this hardware, OBS will have the ability to talk to this and send the output to this device. And then this just becomes an HDMI out that you can bring into your switcher and show or key out as a source. So because this is only a single channel device, there is no alpha channel, there's no alpha transparency layer. So we have to actually use a Luma key for the chat, which means that the keying is not perfect. Sometimes it looks a little bit translucent. Sometimes the blacks, if there's a black color in somebody's icon, then that might become transparent as well. So it's not perfect, but it is nice and small, and it's much more affordable than the larger Ultra Studio, which also then requires 2 outputs. And those are actually SDI outputs, so then you have to convert them from using an HDMI switcher, et cetera, which is why I like this option for a simpler version of it. I will also link down to a video below that talks about my chat plugin for Chrome, which you can use to show chat comments on your screen and bring them into OBS and key them out that way. And I think that about wraps up the studio tour for Lily's setup here. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments down below. And again, thanks to Smartwings for sending over the Smart Shades. They have been a huge upgrade to the space here. And as always, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.